Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sarah. Today I'm going to be talking about how to connect with your teen. So I'm going to just start by giving just a brief little introduction about who I am, what my specialties are. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. My clinical focus is primarily adults, couples, and parents. I specialize in intergenerational trauma healing, communication concerns, and anxiety. I'm also certified as a positive discipline parent educator, and I'm going to be using some of those tools here today. And I'm also a keeping the joy in relationships facilitator. So I know this feels a little formal that I'm sitting here on this table, but we're going to be broadcasting it live too, inshallah. So otherwise I would be moving around a little more, but we'll do with this what we can. So just to kind of give an overview, we're going to be talking a little bit about the teen brain, parents' role, and then just some practical tools. And inshallah, we can all benefit. So I want to start by just doing a poll. So you guys can either use the QR code, or you can go to this website itself and just type in the code. And I'm going to pull up the question that we're starting with. All right, so this is anonymous. But really, I just want to start by asking you guys, like, what words come to mind when you think of teenagers? And you were able to put more than one response, but I really just want y'all to reflect a little bit, just what comes to mind, and we'll start here. I'll give y'all a few minutes. Yeah. 27862344. Show the responses. Yes. There we go. Okay. Seeing a few words here. Know-it-all, resilient, independent, curious, growing. Reluctant, adamant, moody, okay, sensitive. Yeah. Like I said, this is anonymous. I'm just trying to see where we're at. Drama. It's a good one. I used to hear that one a lot. All right, well, I'll give you all just a minute and then we'll go back to the presentation. But really the reason I'm wanting to start with this is because I want to see just what are the preconceived notions or just, what are y'all dealing with on a day-to-day basis? And so inshallah, we can start by building some empathy towards the teens in our life. But yeah, I just wanted to really see where y'all's head was at. As we get started. So going back to the presentation. I saw y'all write a lot of different things. I think sometimes teens get a bad rep. So I wanted to start by just dispelling a little bit about maybe what's going on in the teen mind. I'm going to start by talking about brain development a little bit. Let me put this back on here. So there's two main parts of the brain I wanted to really label, the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. So our brain actually develops from the back to the front. So recent research has actually shown that the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until the age of 25. So really, we can say that adolescence extends from teen years all the way to age 25. And just keeping this in mind, like if the prefrontal cortex is still developing during that time, this part of the brain is actually in charge of cognitive thinking. So this does not mean that teens aren't capable of cognitive thinking. In fact, they are. They very much are. Even some of the words y'all were using, like learning, growing, all of that is, your prefrontal cortex is used for that. However, the limbic system actually develops years before the prefrontal cortex. So just based on the biology of the brain development, what we can draw from that is, okay, teens are actually using a lot more of their limbic system to process their day-to-day experiences compared to maybe adults over the age of 25, where we're using both, maybe the exact same way or similarly, but teens, really the limbic system is the thing that's really at the forefront of their processing. So keeping that in mind, now we also need to look at, okay, well, what are some of the new behaviors that are part of the teen experience? So there's a lot of identity exploration, and this is completely normal part of development that we see at this stage And so this may be the first time in y'all's lives where you may be seeing your teen, your child, really questioning, who am I? They may be focusing a lot more inward. And the reason I bring this up is because I want to kind of dispel this idea that they're being selfish when doing this. This is a completely normal part of development. Particularly in the brain, this is the first time where your child is actually able to grasp abstract concepts related to self-concept. And so with that in mind, they're also doing a lot of novelty seeking. And so I think oftentimes too, teens get this bad reputation that, oh, they just take so many risks, they're doing all these dangerous things. But actually research has shown that really what they're looking for is just new experiences. So they're learning and growing through these new experiences. Like what we know about the way that you learn who you are is through having new experiences. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's unhealthy risks, but keeping this in mind, right? The reason I'm trying to set this scene is because really as we're talking about this, I want you all to be thinking about like, okay, if I know this is what's happening with my teen, what role do I play then? Because if they are looking at new experiences, we want to make sure, okay, are we having open dialogue about these types of experiences? Because if they're not getting that information from you, they're going to get it from somewhere. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we sometimes don't focus on with teens is that this is actually a season of their life of heightened learning. So there's actually a lot of research that's shown that during the time of adolescence, you're actually able to learn more quickly and accurately compared to when you were an adult or even an older adult. And so this is amazing because that means that during this season of life, your child's actually learning such important things, and you can be a really big part of that learning for them. So now we're going to talk a little bit about parents' role. And I wanted to just start by looking to Islamic teachings because we're Muslim, we're sitting here in a masjid. So one of the really, really cool things that, as I was researching, I found, and I wrote here at the bottom just the Yaqeen Institute series on keys to prophetic parenting. That is a beautiful series if y'all haven't looked at it already. Some of this information actually drew from that series. Children are actually described as gifts from Allah whenever they are mentioned in the Quran. As we know, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's all-knowing. So the fact that he uses the word gift when talking about children, like, that must mean something. So just reflecting on that a little bit, what I drew from that is that, children are a trust from Allah. Parents, as parents, you don't own your child. This is ultimately like we all belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, just reflecting on that, like, what does that mean? What is that telling us? And then there's also this hadith that Sheikh Ibrahim Hindi actually talked about in the series, Keys to Prophetic Parenting. There was a Bedouin man who saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually giving like physical affection to his grandsons. And the Bedouin man saw that, and he kind of scoffed and was like, I have 10 children, but I've never given them like physical affection. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam like turned to him and he said, if Allah has removed mercy from your heart, like what can I do for you? And then the very famous quote that we hear a lot in different khutbahs and things like that, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said, whoever does not show compassion will not be shown compassion. And I think this quote is actually used so much, but the fact that this was actually a quote the Prophet used exactly talking about children shows us that first and foremost, who we should be showing compassion and mercy to is our children. And yes, exactly. So I just thought this was very, very powerful. Just even looking to Islam, like the way children are described, the role that the parents play, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So just kind of setting the scene a little bit with these pieces, I wanted to talk a little bit more specifically about the parents' role. So as I mentioned, this is a time where teens they're seeking a lot of new experiences. So as the parents, it's really important that you're, one, building safety in your relationship with your children, in your home, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But really to be able to have these open conversations about hard topics, things like opposite sex interaction, sex, drugs, alcohol. Like if your kids are not hearing that from you first, they're going to hear it from someone else. And so the more open dialogue you have around these things, the more likely it is that your child will come to you and actually engage in these conversations with you if it ever comes up. And part of that is cultivating compassion. So just like we looked to the hadith, the Quran, and I'll talk more about this. This is actually a positive discipline tool that we'll talk a little bit more about. That is a direct way to show compassion, which is through curiosity instead of judgment. Modeling is a huge part of a parent's role. If y'all have teens, y'all had little kids. So I'm sure at a very young age, you saw that your child was almost mirroring your behavior, which is very, very powerful. And I think shows an even bigger piece that as parents that we should keep in mind is that our children are actually following with their eyes more than their ears. So if you ever want your child to do something, how are you modeling it? That is the first question you should be asking yourself. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Part of the parent's role, which is almost like specific to this time of adolescence, is friendship. Your relationship with your child is transitioning more from a teaching role to more of a friendship collaborative role. And this can be done by taking interests in their interests and showing mutual respect. Because just like we talked about with modeling, if you are modeling respecting your child, then they're more likely to respect you. And then I did this on purpose. I put all these different roles, and then I put teach at the very end. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because I don't want this to come off as like, oh, she's just telling us to be really nice to our kids. Like, no, the part of the parent's role also is to set limits by being collaborative and by being kind and firm. And this is also a positive discipline tool that we'll look at a little bit here. All right. So I wanted to just pause here and really just give us a moment to look at this. So you must reach the heart before you can teach the mind. This is actually a quote from the training that I went to get trained as a positive discipline parent educator. And I think it was amazing that as I was actually looking to the Islamic teachings, this is exactly what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam modeled. He literally was talking about compassion, mercy, way before disciplining, rules, any of that. And so I think it's really important for us to just look at this as the guiding, inshallah, hopefully, the guiding tool when working with our adolescents. So on the topic of building safety and openness, I wanted to just pause here and go back to the poll. And so it's the same exact code to get in, but this is just the next question. So I actually wanted to have y'all take a moment to reflect. What do each of you as parents, or just as humans, let's go with that, as humans, need to feel safe to share with someone? So if you're feeling a little stuck, just think about like what makes you feel safe enough to share your concerns with family members, friends. What does trust mean to you? How do you even know you can trust someone? I'm just going to give you all a few moments to reflect on that. Yeah, reliable. That's a huge one. Absolutely. Yes, no judging. Oof, love that. Yeah, feeling heard. Absolutely. I think that ties right into the not being judged. Yeah. Okay, honest feedback, empathy. Absolutely. Yeah. I just want to point out, there were more responses to the first question than this one. Come on, guys. This is a hard one, yeah. All right. I'm getting some good stuff here. Yeah, but just to even take a moment to reflect here, the reason I'm asking y'all these questions is because, just as I said, the parent's role is to model. And just what we know about being human, right? Like we're forever learning. Like we're students of life, So just as we want our children to keep growing, keep learning, that's also something we need to do too. Like are we reflecting on our own behavior? Are we reflecting on our own needs? And if we're doing that, we're better able to actually cultivate that type of environment for our teens, for our children. Yes, thank you guys for these answers. Let me go back to the slideshow. Okay, yeah. So that was really the main question I wanted to leave y'all with for this specific role, and so yeah. So moving on to the cultivating compassion through curiosity questions. So I wanted to just take a moment to talk about what is the purpose of using curiosity versus judgment. So asking, using curiosity, instead of telling, invites your teen to actually think and choose. Exploring the consequences of your teen's choices with them instead of imposing the consequences helps your teen understand, learn, and find solutions to their problems. So the main pieces I want to just point out here is the collaborative nature that curiosity invites. When we're just telling our kids what to do, they don't really get a say. And if we even reflect back on our own adolescence, there was already enough things that we didn't have control over, So the more and more you create an environment of collaboration, the more likely you are to share with someone, like we just talked about, and so the more likely your teen is to share with you. Okay, so I wanted to do kind of an interactive exercise, and I need 3 volunteers for this. Don't be shy. And 3 parents. Let me go with that. 3 parents. So I'll tell y'all what your role is once you come up here. Don't worry, it's not scary. You literally just have to read off the slide. 3 parents, raise your hand. Don't be shy. Come on, guys, we can do scary things. Yes. Okay, we have 1. Yes. All right, 1 more parent. All right. Okay, so I'm going to have 2 people. 1 person's going to be telling, 1 person's going to be asking, and then 1 person's going to be the child. So who wants to be a child? And as a child, you don't have to say anything, actually, for this exercise. Okay. Okay, wait, but you can stand right here. This is actually my dad, so. Yeah, so you can stand right here, but just face that way. Yeah, so you don't see the screen. And then for the two of you, I'd want you to just go sit in front of him as if you're talking to him, right? Oh, no, it's fine. Thank you. Yeah. So, since you guys are just sitting like this, I'm going to have you, sister, what's your name? Mariam, Sister Mariam. I'm going to have you read the telling side, and you're just going to say it directly to Fayaz here. This is my dad. Yeah. And then, brother, what's your name? Ihab? Yes, brother Ihab. I'm going to have you read the asking side directly to my dad. And then at the end, I'll just ask you guys some questions. But again, you just got to read straight off the slide. So I'm going to start with the first one.
Do your homework? What's your plan for your homework tonight?
No, you don't say anything. I'll ask you at the end.
That's not what we use from our teens. They don't stay silent.
I know. Go ahead.
Don't forget your uniform. Have you checked your game preparation lab? Get off the phone. What was our agreement about using phones at the dinner table? Stop yelling. What could we do to solve this problem respectfully?
Okay. So I'm going to start by asking the teen in this example, Baba, what were you noticing about just how you were feeling, how you were thinking when Sister Mariam, it was Sister Mariam, right? Yeah, when Sister Mariam was telling you. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Whereas the question was being asked, is forcing me to put in a situation to start thinking. It doesn't put me in a defensive mode, it puts me in a mode of.
Yeah. Beautifully put. I did not tell him to say this, by the way, guys. This is out of his own volition. But yeah, exactly. Whenever you're being told to do something, you're more likely to be defensive. When you're being asked a question, you kind of have to pause and actually reflect on what you're thinking, what you're feeling. So, Sister Mariam, I just want to hear from you too. What was it like for you to say the telling statements? Did you notice any thoughts, any feelings come up for you?
Exactly how I tell my daughter.
Okay, so it felt very familiar. Okay. I appreciate your honesty.
Get off the phone.
Oh, sure. Brother Ihab, it was Brother Ihab, correct? Yes. What were you noticing, what were you thinking or feeling as you were saying the asking questions?
I agree with Brother Riyad.
Yeah?
Exactly the same response that
Yeah?
generated in me as an adult, actually. Just putting those questions
Yeah.
out as opposed to the telling.
Okay.
Which, honestly, with Sister Maryam, all fall into the same.
Totally.
That's the immediate response of the parent. That
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for volunteering. I appreciate your bravery. But yes, just like they all beautifully put, whenever you are using these curiosity questions, you're inviting your teen to collaborate with you versus just telling them and imposing a consequence on them that they probably don't care about. And so just to kind of go off of that, these are just some sample conversational curiosity questions. This isn't a script or anything, but I just kind of wanted to give some examples. So just kind of like a note to keep in mind. So whenever you are using curiosity questions, you're using what and how questions. When you're adding the judgment, there's usually a why question involved. There's usually a you, blah, 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 you know. I'm sure y'all are very familiar. I'm very familiar. And so, yeah, so just a few examples here, right? So like if you're teen is sharing something, for example, our immediate reaction may be like, oh my God, I know exactly what they need and I need to just tell them. But they're probably gonna get annoyed, they don't wanna hear what you have to say, let's be honest. But instead, right, if you're talking to them in this collaborative way, you're actually inviting them to just figure it out on their own, while you're being there as a safe person for them to actually explore this with, which is the most vital piece here. So, asking things like, then what happened? How do you feel about what happened? How do you wish you handled that situation? And the piece I want to name here, tone is very, very important. So of course, I think we can all say these questions very sarcastically, like, what do you prefer to do in the future, right? Like, that can, you can say that sarcastically, but that's not very kind. That's not very inviting to create an environment of safety with your teen. And so we want to make sure our tone is in check as well when we're asking these types of curiosity questions. Now I want to jump to modeling. So I'm going to invite you guys to reflect again. I won't make you fill out the poll. I may ask some brave souls to give their answers. But again, the reason I'm coming back to reflection is because, like I said, we are lifelong learners. If we are expecting our teens to grow and learn, we should be growing and learning ourselves. And so, like we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, in adolescence, teens are really using the limbic system, the emotional part of the mind. They're leading with that to process their experiences. That doesn't mean the cognitive piece isn't there, but if we know that the emotional piece is kind of what's leading, how can we actually look at our own emotional regulation and ask ourselves, how am I actually modeling to my teen how they should be regulating their feelings, how they should be emoting in general, Am I yelling at them? Am I yelling to my spouse in front of my children, Even if you're not talking to your teens in this manner, they see how you talk to your spouse, That is something that I'm sure y'all are, like I said, y'all have kids, right? Like, y'all probably saw them picking up on when they were even elementary age. Like, this is not something, I think a lot of times as parents, we may believe that, our kids aren't gonna see this. Like, it's a secret, right? Like, they're not gonna know. It's almost 100% guarantee that they know. They have picked up on it, they've picked up on the tone, the energy shift, all of that. They're very smart, And so with all that in mind, it's not only important that we're monitoring how we are showing our emotions to our children, but how are we actually having these emotional types of conversations with our spouse, with our family members, in front of our children. So I want to just turn this question to y'all, and I just want, maybe one or two answers. Don't be shy, there's no wrong answer. But how do you model emotional regulation? Like, just what are some of the things you do? Like, when you're feeling angry, for example, what do you do? When you're feeling sad, what do you do? Again, no wrong answer. Just want to know. Whoever wants to raise their hand. Don't be shy, guys. This is a safe space. Mm-hmm. We try to be stronger and not and make it as important. Totally. That's the one thing that I feel like we all do. Mm-hmm. The other part about modeling emotions when we ourselves are angry, not doing. Yeah. No, I appreciate your honesty. That's very true, right? Like, I think whenever we ourselves are going through a hard time, which is a part of life, and it's going to happen to all of us, right? We try to hide that from our kids sometimes. I think there's a difference. I hear what you're saying. There's a difference between hiding, and then there's a difference between hiding and projecting, basically. Like, are we using our kids as our emotional support person? That's maybe not appropriate. But are we talking to our kids about feelings in general? That can be appropriate, depending on how we're doing it. Like, yeah, I know as a family we've gone through this really hard experience. It's hard for me too. I feel hurt. I feel sad. And that's very appropriate, because chances are, like I said, your teen knows you're sad. If you're not naming it, they're just guessing. It's better that you actually communicate what feeling you're experiencing instead of just keeping it in.
I think I heard some answer over here. I wanted to ask, did someone have an answer on how you regulate your emotions? Just an example. It is a tough, yeah, I think we could do a whole presentation just on this question. Yeah. Anything from the brothers? Totally. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, beautifully put. Absolutely. I think there's a difference, right, between reacting and responding. So a lot of times we just go into the reaction, and even reflecting, okay, what's my teen picking up from me doing that? And yes, responding, taking that pause, taking a step back to really be like, okay, what am I feeling before I say something I regret? That part of it is very difficult. So I just have some tips here. This is not an exhaustive list. Like I said, we could do a whole presentation on this topic, but one of the very appropriate things to do if you yourself are in a conversation with your teen, conversation with your spouse, conversation with anybody in front of your teen, is to just name, I'm feeling angry, I need some space, or I just need some space to just calm down, and then literally physically leaving the space. That is the top thing you can teach your teen. That is the top thing you can do for yourself. And so I think it's really important also to label, like, what are you actually doing when you leave that physical space? Are you just distracting yourself, or are you actually taking time to figure out what happened? So one, we want to start by just bringing ourselves down from the very heightened emotion to kind of a more grounded place so that we are in control of our emotion and our emotion is not in control of us. And deep breathing is one of the top ways to do that. Because oftentimes when we're feeling very heightened, we're not breathing. We're literally not breathing. We're shallow breathing, or maybe even holding our breath. It's something that's so unconscious, but it really truly happens. And so just coming back to our breath, really inhaling for a few seconds and then holding it for a few seconds and then exhaling for a few seconds. And then writing things out is a wonderful, wonderful way to process how you're feeling. Because, it doesn't necessarily involve anyone else. Sometimes we don't have the ability to really go turn to someone for support, or maybe, we're like fighting with someone, we can't talk to them about it, so we need to figure out what's going on for us before we go back to them. So once you're able to write it out, write your thoughts, write your feelings, then you can go back and actually identify, hey, so I actually felt hurt when you said that, and that's why I reacted that way. And so even saying things like, even using I statements, I didn't add that on here, but that's a big one, like using I statements, you're taking responsibility for your feelings. You're not putting that on someone else. And that's a beautiful thing to model for your teen. Yes, this is a question I get asked a lot, right? Like, my kid is doing so-and-so non-Islamic thing. What do I do? I always ask the parent, okay, well, how are you modeling Islam? How are you modeling your relationship with Allah? Does your child even know you have a relationship with Allah? And so, yeah, let me turn to y'all actually for this question. How do you model building a relationship with Allah? Whoever wants to answer. What are some of the practical things y'all are doing day to day to build your relationship with Allah? Yes. Yeah. Can you tell me a little more? Okay. Okay. So like mutual, like with your spouse, or like just, like, what do you mean by that? Ah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So I mean, what I'm gathering from you is like, maybe there's an aspect of kind of having that open dialogue too, either with your teen or just like family in general, of like, hey, what do we believe in? You know, like what are some of the, or here's what I believe, you know, like here's the way I live my life. What do you think? You know, so kind of exactly. Creating an open conversation around beliefs, around values. Beautiful. What else? Anyone else have examples? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Absolutely. Practicing what you preach. Yeah. Is there a way in your life that you do that right now? Yeah? Yeah. Can you give us an example? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, and I think this actually even ties to emotion regulation. Like, imagine you get very angry and then all of a sudden your teen sees you going to make wudu. Like, that would be beautiful. You know, like you're modeling not only how to regulate your emotions, but also building a relationship with Allah. Like, okay, I know that my emotion's getting the best of me, and so how can I come back to my relationship with Allah? Anyone from the sisters? Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, like relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like when especially in moments of anxiety or stress or whenever things are out of our control, just falling back on Allah and saying, okay, I trust Allah. Like literally saying that out loud to your teen. How powerful. Yes. Mm-hmm. Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, just the way you put it too, like even sharing your own experience, I think of that with your teen. I think that can be even more powerful. So like, you know, like, oh, I'm experiencing this hardship, this is what I did, you know? And even labeling, I think sometimes too as parents, or I mean, even myself as a professional, sometimes I'm like, okay, I need to have all the answers. And that's just not true. You know, if you don't know, just be like, I don't know, let's figure it out together. Like this is uncharted territory for me. Like, yeah, like, for example, if your teen's coming to you, yeah, I tried praying, but I'm still sad, you know? You can say, oh, well, you know, I've prayed this way, or I've made this dua, and my sadness actually got easier for me. I'm sorry, that's not your experience. Let's talk more about that. That's again inviting them. That's curiosity, that's collaboration. Because just like one thing may fit for you, it may not fit for them, but you're still modeling, you're still inviting that open conversation. Thank you guys for your answers. There was a lot more answers for this question. Yes, yes. Yeah. Right. Like, sorry, I missed the question part of it, because I heard your statement. That's true, for sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I know that that's like a broad question too, and inshallah we'll have more time for Q&A at the end, but just the first thing that pops into my mind as you're saying that is, one, I think a big piece of, for example, if we were to talk in the context of your child's relationship with Islam, or with, let's say that, okay, there's certain things we know are haram and halal, right? Maybe they're doing something that you think is not halal, or like it's on the border there, and you're concerned, right? And just like you said, you can't control them, you can't necessarily force them into doing something, although sometimes we think we have that control. That's why I even started with children are a gift. We don't own them. And coming back to that piece of, okay, even going back to this piece right here, this is what comes up for me actually. So how much of this is happening at home? Am I creating an environment of safety and openness? That is always what I come back to. Yes, you can't change someone's mind, but you can work on creating an environment of safety and openness so you're actually inviting conversation. Maybe today they're not going to agree with you, and that doesn't mean that that's going to be their way of thinking forever, right? Because this period of time, like we talked about, it's a time of questioning. It's a time of really figuring things out for yourself, what it means to you. So how many open conversations, how much open dialogue are you having around that? How are you building safety in your home environment? And I see or is it a, yes, go ahead. Yeah. True. Yeah. You're good. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Beautifully put. Yeah. And inshallah, we'll have more Q&A too at the end. But yeah, even coming back to this, so just a few tips, right? Like you guys even mentioned, praying in front of your kids, praying with your spouse in front of your kids, having conversations with Allah in front of your kids, turning to Him both in hard times and with gratitude. This piece actually, I'm sure you guys have seen on TV and media, you see, these Christian parents leaned up against the bed with their kids and they're praying at the end of the night. Why don't we do stuff like that? Why don't we sit together with our kids and make dua together? It's always focused on prayer. Yes, prayer is fard, then we do that. But a lot of times we don't really know what we're saying, especially as a teenager. They may not even understand what the surahs mean. So are you cultivating this practice of gratitude, of reflection with your teen, with your child, even earlier before they're teens, at the end of the day, to really model and show, hey, you can actually create a direct line of contact with Allah, and this is how you do it. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Yes, yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like even that quote I had written, right, related to modeling, like children learn with their eyes far more than they learn with their ears. So talking a little bit about, I see your hand, yes. Oh, beautiful. Wow. Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. Yeah, because I think that even ties into the emotion regulation aspect of it that we were talking about, right? Like, that's so beautiful. I'm gonna quickly move through, I think, three more slides, because I know they're gonna call the adhan, but inshallah, for more questions, we'll just have them at the end. But I appreciate you guys interacting and sharing, because we all learn from each other. So yes, the piece about friendship I wanted to say is being intentional about connecting with your teen in the way that they need consistently by understanding their love language. And so the reason I italicized they need is because I think sometimes we think, oh, this is how I feel connected. So let me connect with my teen like this. And they're like, oh, I actually don't care about that. And that's not how they feel connected. That's not even how they feel loved. So even in the Yaqeen series that I was talking about, Sheikh Ibrahim Hindi talks about sometimes, if you ask a teenager, oh, do your parents love you? Sometimes they literally answer, I don't know, and even the teens I've worked with, this is a very common experience, actually, because like we talked about, in adolescence, you're questioning everything, it's related to identity, and so really being very, very direct, very forward about the fact that you love your kids. Because you yourself, you're like, okay, yeah, I know I love my kids. I'm doing all this stuff for them, they must know. It's like, well, are you telling them you love them in the way that they feel loved? And that's what love languages are. You all may have heard this concept of love languages. It's usually used with couples, but actually there's teen love languages too. This can be used in any relationship. So just to kind of briefly go over them, so love languages basically means that it's kind of been categorized by the psychologist, Dr. Gary Chapman, into 5 different categories of just the way people feel loved. And so there's acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, and physical touch. So these are kind of the broad strokes, the broad categories, right? So I think even looking at this, reflecting for yourself, how do you feel loved? That's something that all the things that I'm hoping that y'all are gathering from this experience is that ultimately come back to asking yourself too, what am I doing? How do I feel about this, right? Because your teen, your adolescent, they're picking up on that. So just some examples, right? If your teen's love language is acts of service, helping them with homework or folding their laundry. If it's receiving gifts, like maybe getting their favorite drink from Starbucks or like a boba drink or something that they really like. Quality time. Quality time means something different for everyone. So even specifically understanding for them, okay, what activity do they like to do together with you? Words of affirmation, giving them encouragement. And encouragement means really seeing them for what they're doing. Like, oh, I see how hard you've been working on this project. I see how hard you've been working on this new interest you've taken on. It's so beautiful to see how much effort you're putting into this. I really see you doing that, in the way that feels most authentic for you, right? Again, tone is everything. And then physical touch, hugs, head rubs, head massages, And so the reason I show all 5 of these is that generally speaking, there is one category mainly that you feel loved by. I'm sure as y'all are even reading this, maybe one even sticks out to you. And maybe like you're like, oh yeah, when my spouse does this for me, I really do feel loved. Or man, I wish they did this more. Okay, that's the piece that will clue you in. Okay, this is my love language. So going back to that collaboration, creating that safety, that open space with your teen. Hey, do you know I love you? How do you feel loved? Let's talk about that. I want us to be able to connect in that way. Because you may think that you're showing them that, and maybe it's just not, maybe it's just missing, Maybe it's not really hitting the mark there. Yes? Yes. Yeah, I think, so, I hear you as far as the biological aspect of it goes. I'm not super seasoned in biology. I'm way more on the social side of things. So the piece that comes to mind when you say that is ultimately all teens want is a sense of belonging. They want to feel connected. They want to feel loved. That is irrespective of their sex, right? So really looking at, okay, even though I have a son, like, am I still talking to him about feelings? Because men also, they have feelings, right? They have a lot of needs too that need to be met, just the same way females do. Because I think sometimes we put our kids into boxes like, oh, it's my daughter, she's very emotional, or like, oh, she just needs more hugs. And it's like, well, have you hugged your son? Like, you need to hug your son too. They want hugs too. They may not say it, right? Because maybe we don't say it. So even thinking about that, how am I modeling that as well? Yes, and then the last tool here, well, I know we're really close to Adhan, so let me get through this last piece here, is teaching by being kind and firm. So again, I left the teaching piece for the very end, because we're focusing on the connection, the compassion, the collaboration, all of that before we're getting into any sort of teaching. And so the reason I even bring this up is because even though your role is to collaborate and help your teen come up with, okay, what do you think is the consequence of this? Or like, I don't know, what do you think would happen? We're still allowed to set limits, right? Like, there's still some boundaries that you need to have for your teen, because that is also teaching them something. Like, oh, I can't just go do whatever, whenever. So for example, I was gonna have some people come here and do the exercise again, because I think it's more powerful, but we'll go with this for the sake of time. So if you're just being kind, you may say, okay, I'll give you 5 more minutes again of phone time. And if you're just being firm, you may say, if you don't stop texting right now and do your homework, I'm gonna take your phone away for the rest of the month. Maybe a lot of us fall in this category. However, there's actually a lot more power in being both kind and firm. And y'all may notice that I wrote "and" in capital letters, because I think oftentimes, even the way our language is built is usually we're saying "but." So we may be like, oh, I know this is really hard, but you still have to do it. It's like, well, whenever we use the word "but," it kind of negates everything we said before it, like almost like, oh yeah, I was waiting for the but, like that sort of thing. We're not really validating our teen's experience. So really bringing both the kindness and the firmness together and making sure we're connecting it with an "and." So I know homework isn't fun. I know you'd rather be texting your friends. I get it. And homework needs to be done first. Like, there's a ton of stuff. Y'all can all attest to that. As adults, we need to do it even though we hate it. And so, the more we teach our teens that during that developmental age, inshallah, the easier it'll be for them too as they get older. And yeah, so I just wanted to come back to this slide, because y'all may have remembered from the asking, right? I talked about, like, what was our agreement about using phones at the dinner table. So actually a really, really helpful tool is to collaborate. Collaborate with your teen. Like, they can actually set their own boundaries. So what I mean by that is having this is a positive discipline tool. It's like a tool card. So sitting down, having a discussion where each person gets to voice their feelings and thoughts on the issue. So it's literally like, imagine having a work meeting. There's not just one person telling everyone what you're supposed to do. It's collaborative. You're brainstorming together. So bringing your team into that conversation. Hey, what do you think is a good time that you should be home now that you've started driving? What do you think? And they're like, oh, 2 a.m. And you're like, well, let's talk more about that. What do you think 2 a.m., So like having that, creating that dialogue, because more than likely, your team knows, okay, these are the parameters. The fact that y'all are sitting here tells me y'all are wonderful parents. Like y'all care. It's written on all y'all's faces, right? So even having that trust in yourself, that trust in Allah, like, okay, I've raised a good kid. They're gonna be able to figure out what is their limit and what's not. Let's have a collaborative conversation about it. What do you think your curfew should be? Do you think it's helpful when you sleep with your phone? Do you feel like you get better sleep when your phone isn't just blowing up next to you? Let's talk about that. But yeah, ultimately it's, once you have those agreements, then instead of being like, what did we talk about? Like, I told you this, don't do that, right? It's like, hey, what was our agreement? Like, we decided this together. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's the very important part, avoiding judgment and criticism. So I know that the adhan, I think, was supposed to be 2 minutes ago. So I don't know if we have to stop here, but for the sake of time, let's just end with this poll, because I think this will actually show us all, inshallah, we can learn from each other. So after this presentation, or just from your life experiences, as a parent, how can you connect with your teen? What's that? Listening more. Listening more, yes, beautiful. Yes. Yay, this is the key word, everyone. Collaborate. Yes, collaborating, accepting, communicating. Yes. I love the word accepting. Like if you really just accept and have empathy for where your teen is just in their journey right now, it's so much easier to really lean into the curiosity then. Because otherwise we're just so focused on like, I need to get them to this place, I need to get them here. It's like, well, how can we just trust that they're going to get there? And we're just coming back to creating those collaborative conversations. Yes, being kind. Love, yes. Ask, not tell. You guys are paying attention. Yes, moderated tone. Beautiful. Well, since no one has called adhan, we'll just go with, okay, we have a few minutes before Iqama. So does anyone have any questions? Yes? A good book I recommend. So actually the tools I've been using, the positive discipline tools, Positive Discipline was actually created by Dr. Jane Nelson. So she actually has a book called Positive Discipline Parenting. There's actually also, I'm forgetting the name of it, but there's actually a book written by a Muslim practitioner. So this practitioner actually used some Islamic stuff combined with positive discipline. I think if you literally just search up Islam positive discipline, you'll be able to find the book. But yeah, that's a great one. And I will just leave my information here on the screen. If you have any more specific questions or you'd like to work with me, like I said, I work with parents. Feel free to email me. Email is the best way to get in touch with me. I also put my website on there. It has my email on my website too. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys being here on a Saturday night, not only for yourselves, but for your children. This is such an important topic. I could talk about it forever. But yes, I just appreciate y'all's time and appreciate y'all sharing and just being brave and, collaborating and answering my questions. I know I asked a lot. Yes. Totally. Yeah. Yes, yes. Beautiful question. Well, one, the fact that you're even asking me that, I think just shows how wonderful of a parent you are. I can't not say that. But kind of like one of the tools I was giving for the emotion regulation piece is journaling. So, and because journaling really, it has that it gives you that intentional pause. And, sometimes journaling something as simple as, how did I feel today? What triggered me? What made me really mad? Or like, oh, this situation happened, that was not great. How do I wish I would handle that in the future? So just like we pray 5 times a day, being able to pause and connect to Allah, are we pausing and connecting with ourselves? Are we having that dialogue with ourselves? Just checking in. Where am I today? Where am I this week? If you can't do it every day, right? Yeah, does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, thank you for asking. Yeah. Anyone else? I think we have a few more minutes before Iqama. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't see any more hands, so I think we'll just end here. All right, guys, thank you so much again for being here with me this evening, and inshallah, may Allah give us all the hidayah and the tools we need to continue not only bettering ourselves, but just bettering our relationships. All right, jazakallah.